Now we will discuss the latest development. Journalist Elif Lyman is joining us live from Rome to discuss the shifting power dynamics between the European Union and the United States. Elif, thank you so much for joining us here on A News.
My pleasure.
Well, let's start talking about the latest developments. Let's start by the war in Ukraine and the ongoing ceasefire negotiations having been witnessed the shift in paradigm after the argument between the President Trump and Zelensky. What will this new pattern mean for the Europeans, in your opinion?
Well, I think that Europe is really at a kind of a crossroads when it comes to geopolitical and international affairs, because it's been so reliant on the U.S. up until now. So a lot of European leaders are talking about the need to be more autonomous in terms of defense, in terms of economic growth and trade and that sort of thing. And the question is whether it has the capacity to do so. There's not a lot of arms manufacturing in Europe. That is a priority for leaders to step up on. There's not a lot of domestic consumption compared to exports and so on. So that's another priority. And even in small areas like satellites, Elon Musk, the billionaire advisor to Trump, is the head of Starlink, which provides a lot of satellite support to Ukraine. And that could be pulled at any moment. He threatened to do so and then backed off. So the European satellite companies are also trying to step up their support. But there's a lot that needs to be done in a short time if Europe wants to be more autonomous from the U.S. in this way.
Well, Eric, when we consider this like that, the situation now we are under is interesting, isn't it? Because the United States and the European Union probably has never been like this before, and they have so much diplomatic clash, they have so much trade clash, security clash also. So what would you say about how the Europeans are perceiving the most recent security and trade-related tensions between the two entities?
Well, I think Europe is at a disadvantage in some ways because it's not a centralized unit like the United States is. The president of the European Commission does not have presidential power. Instead, there are 27 heads of government, and they're trying to walk a very difficult line here, where on the one hand, they're trying to talk the U.S. president out of taking certain steps or maybe reducing tariffs or providing some security and things like that. We've seen this with Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron traveling to Washington recently. Here in Italy, the Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, is quite close to President Trump. But at the same time, they're trying to step up their own security needs. There's talk of a European army for the first time. And how they navigate this is going to be very interesting to watch. It's a huge challenge. And European leaders insist they're up to the challenge, but I think the coming months will be very telling.
Well, when you look at from the perspective that the Europeans, what would you say about the stance right now? Do you think that they're going to continue helping out Ukraine, or it is going to be more like an autonomy thing right now, with the not as a European Union, but the sovereignties themselves are going to decide whether or how much they want to help out Ukraine or not? Because without the United States and without their effect on helping Ukraine, it is going to change the power dynamics as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's a very good insight. European leaders have insisted that they were going to stand by Vladimir Zelensky and Ukraine no matter what. And we've seen that after he had that very difficult conversation, Zelensky, in the White House. The European leaders met with him and he was embraced and supported and so on. It's just a question of whether Europe can do it. We're seeing in Germany, for example, the new government, Friedrich Merz, who is most likely the next chancellor of Germany, has said he intends at all costs to support Ukraine, but the party that finished second in the recent German national elections is against this. There's a growing sentiment elsewhere in Europe that this is very expensive. And so can Europe keep writing these enormous checks? That's one question. And can it step in and provide the sort of intelligence, logistical support and military support that the U.S. has been doing up until now. And I don't think that there's a clear answer on that. Leaders insist that they can do it. But before Donald Trump took office, there was a lot of speculation among European analysts that Europe might be forced to pull the plug on Ukraine. So far, that hasn't happened. But the facts remain that it's very difficult for Europe to fill in this gap. It just does not have the size of the aerospace and arms industry that the U.S. has, and it does not have as deep pockets as the U.S. has.
Well, Europeans are also witnessing the final period of Pope Francis's reign. The Vatican has shared pictures regarding its condition recently. What can you tell us about the Pope's current condition, and what awaits the Vatican in case of his demise?
Well, to a lot of people who have been around and following the Vatican for a long time, and I'm one of them, this reminds us a lot of 2005 when Pope John Paul II was in the final months of his papacy. We have seen these pictures released today of Pope Francis, and the information coming out of the Vatican is that he is slowly improving, strengthening his condition. But at the same time, he's 88 years old. He's lived his whole life with missing half of a lung. He keeps a very busy schedule. And it's not hard to imagine that we may be in the final chapter of his papacy. And that would mean that there would be a conclave coming up. There's already a lot of speculation about who the next pope could be, if it'll come back to being an Italian pope, or the last three popes obviously were not Italian. We have not had an Italian pope since 1978, but before that, there was only Italian popes for 500 years. So will it come back to that? Will it be somebody who is sort of pastoral the way that Pope Francis is, or will it be more of an intellectual figure the way Pope Benedict, his predecessor, was? There's a lot of questions here, and it's considered impolite to speculate about this too much, but all eyes are on Pope Francis at the Vatican and his recovery. The pictures today are a good sign, but it's hard to imagine him returning to the same level of vigor and energy that he had before he went into the hospital back in mid-February.
Do we lastly expect any change in the European perspective if something happens to the Pope, or is he more like a spiritual leader and not a political leader right now?
I personally think that he is both a spiritual and a secular leader. He is sort of a representative of ethics and morals, especially in a world where there's a lot of warfare and clashes and intrigue and trade wars and things like that going on. There was a very interesting article in the New York Times a few days ago, a column, I should say, by David Gibson that talked about the Pope's role as a sort of moral beacon in the world. And I think that when the Pope has thrown his support behind certain topics, such as migration or climate change or things like that, it's had an effect, and not just in countries that are majority Catholic. So I think that the absence of the Pope weighing in on these topics will be felt, and the role that the next Pope takes in these areas will also be important to note.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for your insights. That was quite interesting, and that was quite important for us. Thank you so much for joining us here on A News.
My pleasure. Thank you.